pride in the newsroom. A possible turning point in what's arguably the world's most brutal conflict, certainly one of the longest and bloodiest. The Congolese army, Tuesday, capturing the last rebel hilltop from M23 militias near the border with Rwanda and Uganda. Too often overwhelmed. This time, the army got the active backing and training of a new crack UN force, and in just 2 months, turned the tide in spectacular fashion.
This belonged to the M23. They had their cache of weapons here, but with the government's firepower, they were defeated.
Of course, that's how the government is spinning the story. The M23 claims it's a voluntary withdrawal, that time had come to kickstart Uganda brokered talks. So what did turn the tide? Too often accused of passivity, the UN and its 20,000 uniformed personnel in Congo, this time taking an active role. Just how active, we'll see. But the pressure wasn't just military. The US, UK, and European Union had reduced aid to Rwanda. Rwanda, which, like Uganda, regularly denies backing the mainly Tutsi M23 rebellion. Rwanda, which, according to critics, finds itself without a proxy militia inside Eastern Congo for the first time in decades. Now that it's won on the battlefield, will Kinshasa forego substantive peace talks? More importantly, will the authorities aggressively pursue the Hutu militiamen within its borders, militiamen who are the offshoots of those who committed the Rwandan genocide? Ever since 1994, the mineral-rich Eastern Congo has pretty much continuously been a conflict zone, with civilians bearing the overwhelming brunt of the atrocities. Can those civilians finally see the light at the end of the tunnel? Today in the France 24 debate, we're looking at a turning tide in Eastern Congo. With us from Berlin, Simone SCHLINDWEIN, Great Lakes correspondent for German newspaper TAZ. Welcome back to the show, Simone. Also joining us, General Dominique TRINQUAND, consultant expert on United Nations peacekeeping operations, having actively taken part in more than one himself. Douglas Yates, who teaches at the American University of Paris, the author most notably of The Scramble for African Oil, Oppression, Corruption, and War for Control of Africa's Natural Resources. And joining us from the Normandy town of Pervenchère, Congolese journalist and blogger Cedric KALONJI. Thank you for being with us. The France 24 debate, where you can join the conversation, and you have, on Facebook and on Twitter, our hashtag F24debate. Yes, back in August, the M23 was at the gates of Goma, the main town in that part of Eastern Congo. African Defense Review reports that over the past few weeks, both FARDC, that's the government forces, and the United Nations moved troops to new positions around North Kivu that were designed to encircle and split the M23's forces along a major north-south axis. In the last couple of days, though, Cedric KALONJI, things have gone fast indeed. What do you think was the key to the success on the battlefield?
I don't want to talk about success. I think the Congolese government negotiated something with the M23. They negotiate the retirement of the rebel group, and then after they will discuss about the end of M23. But there is one thing to keep in mind. M23 is not the only one rebel group in the region. Right now, we have solved the first problem, but we have more than 20 other rebel groups in the region. Is the Congolese army extend the offensive to other armed groups such as the FDLR or Mai Mai? Then, if the answer is no, then Rwanda, the neighbor Rwanda, will always have an excuse to try out raids in the Eastern Congo.
All right, as you say, it's not necessarily as military a victory as it seems. The M23 certainly thinks so. They insist, as we said at the top, that it's not a defeat, but a conscious decision to graduate to the negotiating table.
I left Rumangobo to escape the fighting between the government troops and the M23. When the M23 failed, we fled into the mountains, and the conflict followed us. Government planes bombarded the mountain. And even until now, they've been fighting in the hills.
All right, that was not a spokesperson for the M23, but a resident of the area responding. The M23, which says that, again, that it is not a military defeat on their part.
So you can be forced on something and you don't have the will to do it, you're not going to do it. But we're looking at people, we're looking at the cause that created M23 in the first place. So we have the willingness to actually sit down on the table, discuss this issue, because we can fight with this issue. The war is not going to solve them.
So Simone, tell us, was it a military victory or not?
I would not say it is really a victory because, first of all, General Makenga didn't give an order, concrete order yet to put down the arms, to lay down the arms. This order came from the president of the M23, Bertrand Bisimwa, which doesn't have a really high command authority to give orders to the troops. So let's see what General Makenga will say in the next couple of days. There was a deal cut in South Africa, in Pretoria, just a few days ago, between all heads of states of the international the Great Lakes region and the South African Development Corporation, and to say now there are 5 days until the assignment or a peace deal must be signed in Kampala. And let's see what kind of signature we will see on these documents and who will obey the agreement which will be signed there. And if General Makenga is still hiding somewhere in the hills between in the triangle between Congo, Uganda and Rwanda, it's still not clear where he exactly is, where he could be located, and what will be his future, especially.
So it's too early to tell, you're saying, whether or not the M23 is on the run?
Yes, I would say it is really the final chapter, and the final point of this chapter is only to be said when General Makenga lies down his arm and his pistol and comes out of this bush. Before, I would not draw any line under this situation right now.
All right. Some people are, though. One of our viewers here saying on Twitter, the submission of the M23 rebels is a good step towards peace and stability in the region. The locals, as we were saying, they're wary. They've seen militias and rebel movements disappear and reappear. Simone just saying that the head of the M23 is yet to weigh in. It's happened so many times over the past 2 decades. Just to give you an idea of how confused it all can be, Nicolas Germain has this story.
Crowds gathered in Kinshasa to thank the army after it defeated the M23 rebels.
Our army has won the war in the east. That's why we're here.
But some think they might be celebrating too quickly. Recent history has shown that there's a cycle in the Kivus in mineral-rich Eastern Congo. Tutsi-dominated rebellions appear, are defeated, and emerge sometime later under another name. It all began with the Rwandan genocide in 1994. According to the UN, 800,000 people, mostly Tutsis, were killed. Many Hutus, including some of the killers, then fled to Congo. After having helped Laurent Désiré Kabila take power in 1997, Rwandan leader Paul Kagame then believed he wasn't doing enough to fight against the FDLR Hutu militia. These tensions turned into a regional conflict. It engulfed a dozen countries, lasted 5 years, and left several million people dead. Several years later, in 2008, a new Tutsi-led Congolese rebellion, Laurent Nkunda's CNDP, said it was there to fight against the Hutu militia. All groups were also vying for the region's mineral resources. The following year, after a peace agreement, the CNDP integrated the Congolese army. But in 2012, it said the government wasn't respecting its promises and took up arms again under the name M23. Today, the M23 has been vanquished, and Kinshasa promises to defeat the Hutu militia. But will it be enough to put a definitive end to this cycle of rebellions?
All right, whether or not it's anything definitive, what is clear, and this is how the Financial Times headline is, it a rare victory is how they call it. On his Twitter feed, Africa researcher and blogger Jason Stearns posted photos of the posters that have gone up in Kinshasa celebrating the army. He writes that it's the government's biggest win on the battlefield in 50 years. Of course, key to all of that, General Trinquant, is this new force, 3,000 men. It's called the Force Intervention Brigade. It's part of those 20,000 uniformed peacekeepers of the United Nations that are stationed in Congo. Those 3,000 troops How decisive were they?
I think that to achieve this aim, you've got to have the conjunction of two factors. The factor that the Security Council must say enough is enough, we need a strong decision. And the second factor is the will of country to provide troops for a dangerous mission. And after all this year of war in the Eastern Congo, it was enough. Probably a certain number of countries were supposing that Rwanda was behind that, clearly say to Rwanda, stop supporting these troops, M23 and all that. And on the other side, there were countries like South Africa, Malawi, Tanzania, were ready to provide troops for this support. But I must add that there is a third factor, the fact that the Congolese army, supported by the UN, decided to go on the offensive. And that clearly shows when an army like in Congo was defeated a few months ago, suddenly is able to fight because suddenly I think the government of Congo clearly take care of this army. And so they were supported by the UN and supported by the government. And that's probably what's reached a victory like that.
Many times in the past, the UN in Eastern Congo has been accused of passivity. In some cases, there have been instances of wrongdoings, corruption, or worse by some of those UN peacekeepers that have been there over the years. In this case, is this a precedent, this Force Intervention Brigade?
It is a precedent in Congo. I must say in UN, there was a same idea and the same force in 95 in Bosnia, where the British and the French at that time decided that enough was enough. And they put together a force on the UN mandate in 95, the Rapid Reaction Force, which leads to Dayton Agreement. Probably people don't remember that at the end of August 95, suddenly UN forces shell Serb around Sarajevo. And at the end, the Serbs decided that they were defeated. So they were president 18 years ago. But you need to find a country able to provide troops for this dangerous mission. And in UN, it is not always the case.
Douglas Yates, do you think we'll see now, after what's happened over the past, 2 months inside of Congo and its rapid acceleration over the past week, that this could set a precedent, most notably for Central African Republic, which is in dire need of some policing right now?
Yeah, within the peacekeeping community, or what would now be called peace operations, there's been an understanding, because MONUC is the world's largest peacekeeping force. MONUC is the UN mission of which this brigade was a part. It's been going on for a decade. Often there have been catastrophes because the soldiers either didn't have the mandate to do more than protect a perimeter, or didn't have the logistics or the equipment to actually defend themselves or go on the offensive. So here bringing in troops is seen as a success, but there's also a danger. And within the community, there's a great debate. In this case, I happen to think it's good news. I'm not a defender of M23, and certainly the Serbs who committed atrocities in Srebrenica deserved a military defeat. But the debate is precisely on that point. There is a norm in the international community, and the norm is if you will, the whole basis of the community, which is the norm of non-intervention. The counter norm, the one that these are based on, is the responsibility to protect. And making more muscular responsibility to protect is pleasing to us in the West. But this is not pleasing to China, and it's not pleasing to Russia.
But in this case, Douglas, we're not talking about a sovereign state, for instance. Here we're talking about a militia.
Absolutely. So in this, it's a good place to run this kind of mission. But imagine if the United States and France and Britain wanted to do this in Syria and not in a zone nobody cares about. There would be opposition to it. So the debate's not being raised now because, in a sense, these are acceptable enemies, as were the Serbs who were attempting genocide in the early 1990s. But working from an acceptable case to a slightly less acceptable case, or to a case where you have a client of China or Russia, and we'll see that there's not a shared set of norms, but what we have is increasing East-West divide. I happen to be on the West, As I say, I support this action, but to speak of an international community would be the wrong language. What we're seeing is a division between those who support the responsibility to protect, like perhaps you and I, and those who oppose it.
All right, Cedric KALONJI, your thoughts on this this Force Intervention Brigade, one that again has in it South African, Tanzanian, and Malawian troops?
Sorry, I don't hear a question.
I was asking you what are your thoughts on this UN Force Intervention Brigade that worked alongside the Congolese government forces?
I think it's a good idea to launch attack with troops from that country. But the question about South Africa, for example, is South Africa has many interests in Congo. They are supporting the government against M23. But what's the next step? What they will do? They will go back to South Africa, or will they stay in Congo and then help the Congolese government to stay in power and then apply some censorship against everybody who will ask some question? I don't know if my point is clear, but it's a good thing to have that offensive force in Congo, but it's the first time. Right now, it works. M23 is out of many cities in the Eastern Congo. But what's the next step now?
Simone SCHLINDWEIN, should we be a little bit wary of the South Africans, as you just heard Cedric KALONJI say?
Yes, clearly, not only on the South Africans, but on all other states who sent now their aggressive troops into Congo for this intervention brigade. I would say they don't do it because of the Congolese and that they want to establish peace in the Congo in the first hand, but rather more because they have business and economical interests in Congo. And I guess there is a kind of a deal will be cut in the background, behind the scenery, where it's about huge mining concessions, probably the South African are interested in, as well as in the oil exploration in the Virunga Park, which literally was occupied by M23. So you cannot really say there is a clear non-business interest why these troops had been deployed. It was clearly a decision. Why these countries came into was a decision made on in different settings, and I would not say in the first place because of peace in Congo.
Eastern Congo, mineral rich. We're going to pick up on that point when we come back. We have to take a quick break. Stay with us. You're watching the France 24 debate.